The story of Sarah Baartman is one of tragedy, exploitation, and resilience. A woman whose life became a symbol of racism, objectification, and colonial cruelty. Her name may not be well known to everyone, but her story has left an indelible mark on history. Today, we unravel the life of Sarah Baartman, the Hottentot Venus. Sarah Baartman was born around 1789 in the Cape Colony, modern-day South Africa, to the Khoikhoi people, an indigenous group often referred to as the Hottentots by European colonizers. Little is known about her early life, but she was said to be born with extraordinary physical features, including a large, protruding posterior, which would later become a focal point of her exploitation. She grew up in the colonial Cape, under the control of the Dutch East India Company, in a world dominated by European settlers and the slave trade. But Sarah's life would soon take a turn that no one could have predicted. In the early 1800s, Sarah was taken from her homeland under the promise of better opportunities. A British doctor named William Dunlop and his business partner, Alexander Dunlop, convinced her to travel to Europe alongside her companion, an African man named Hendrik Keizer, both of whom saw her as a spectacle rather than a human being. Sarah was exhibited in London and later Paris, where she was displayed as a freak show attraction under the name the Hottentot Venus. Her large, exposed buttocks, considered a bizarre physical feature by European standards, were the focus of the show. Audiences came in droves to see her, turning her into a symbol of racial and sexual exoticism, completely detached from her humanity. Sarah's life in Europe was one of extreme objectification. She was displayed in a cage, dressed in a minimal, revealing outfit, and paraded before the public. Her physicality was studied and exploited, with crowds gawking at her every move, many seeing her as a curiosity rather than a human being. She was subjected to degrading and humiliating displays, and her body became the subject of scientific study. European doctors and anthropologists, fascinated by her physical features, conducted a series of invasive experiments on her body. The term Hottentot Venus was coined, solidifying her status as an object of scientific curiosity. The psychological toll on Sarah was profound. Imagine being treated not as a person, but as a specimen. The public mockery, the endless stares, and the dehumanizing treatment must have been unbearable. But this wasn't just a one-time event. Her exploitation went on for years. Even after her initial tour, Sarah's exploitation continued in public shows. She was paraded around as a symbol of racial and sexual stereotypes, and many thought of her as a living spectacle, both grotesque and exotic, in ways that reflected deeply entrenched racial hierarchies. After years of being used as a public curiosity, Sarah Baartman's life took another tragic turn. In 1815, after her health deteriorated from the grueling life she led in Europe, she died at just 26 years old from an unknown illness, possibly from a combination of physical stress, malnutrition, and mental anguish. Her body was not allowed to rest in peace. Instead of a proper burial, her remains were kept on display. After her death, her body was dissected, and her genitalia and brain were preserved and put on display at the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, where they remained for over a century. It was only in 2002, nearly 200 years after her death, that Sarah Baartman's remains were finally returned to South Africa. Her family members, along with South African officials, fought for the repatriation of her remains. She was given a proper burial in her homeland, but the wounds of her exploitation remain. In 2002, a statue of Sarah Baartman was erected in her honor in her hometown, marking the long-awaited recognition of her suffering and strength. Her story is a symbol of colonial exploitation, racism, and the painful intersection of gender, race, and identity. Sarah Baartman's story is a dark chapter in history, but it is also a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. She was a victim of racial and sexual exploitation, yet she is also remembered as a symbol of resistance. Today, her story resonates, serving as a reminder of the ongoing struggles for racial equality, dignity, and respect. Her life reminds us of the importance of seeing each other as human beings, not objects for spectacle. It is only through understanding our past that we can ensure a more just future for all people, regardless of their race, gender, or body. The life of Sarah Baartman may have been marred by exploitation and injustice, but her story is not one of defeat. It is one of survival. As we continue to learn from her legacy, let us remember that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and humanity. Sarah Baartman may be gone, but her story lives on. A call for justice and equality in a world that has too often turned a blind eye to its most marginalized voices. Thanks for watching. If you found Sarah Baartman's story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot and helps us keep sharing important stories like this one. See you next time.